So maybe your body's been on guard for a long time, and some part of you has known it for years without quite having the words for it. Maybe you felt it in your shoulders that have never really dropped, or in your jaw when you find it clenched in the night, or maybe it's your breath that gets part way down and stops. And maybe you've done the gentle things like when you catch yourself at the sink with your shoulders up to your ears and you ask them to come down. And maybe they came down for a few seconds, but then they went right back up. That isn't failure of willpower or of awareness because a body doesn't release through force. It releases through safety, and almost nobody tells you the next part, which is that when safety arrives, it doesn't always feel the way you were promised. Welcome to Patterns to Purpose. Wherever you are right now, in your bed, on the couch, in a quiet room with the door closed, I want you to know that for the next few minutes, you don't have to be anyone. Not the mother, not the spouse, not the woman who holds it all together. Just you. Let's take a nice cleansing breath together. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Good. The places in our body that are tight and held and braced were never failures. They were adaptations. And there's an enormous difference between those two words. Of our four bodies, the physical one tells the truth first because it starts telling the truth well before the rest of you is willing to hear it. A name comes up on your phone and your jaw tightens before you've decided whether to answer it or not. Or you sleep 8 hours and wake up tired and exhausted in a way that sleep didn't touch. Your body learned early that certain moments would cost, and it learned to be ready ahead of time. Those adaptations were faithful, and nobody hands your body a memo saying that the difficult years are over and it can now stand down. And I have to correct something. I believe for too many years, because I used to say that seeing a pattern is what frees you, but it isn't. Seeing the pattern removes its authority over you, but it's the work of creating space between the stimulus and response, along with the discernment to know how to choose, that really changes things. You can notice your shoulders every day for a year and they will not come down because they were never braced against a thought. So you can't talk them down. And what they're braced against is a belief about what happens to you if you stop holding. Something in you took note of a danger it could never really point to afterwards. And our bodies won't stand down from a threat if it can't point to it. So it does the only sensible thing left and stays ready for whatever's coming all of the time. So a body does not stand down on instruction. It stands down when it finally learns what it was guarding. And once you can name it out loud, the guarding has somewhere to point. And a thing you can point at is always smaller than a thing you cannot. Nothing about the past has changed. What changed is that the rule stopped being invisible. And an old rule, you can see, has to make its case like everything else does, but this one can't. And I'll tell you how I know, because I've spent my working life in healthcare where I was the one that could be relied on. And for 6 years of it, I was in treatment for cancer, and I did not miss a day of work. I'm not telling you any of that to hand you some type of hardship story. And I don't want it heard as one. I'm telling you a body story. I minimize my cancer to my colleagues, my family. And this is the part that took me the longest to see, to myself. With treatment in the morning and a meeting in the afternoon. And when people asked, I said I was fine. And I meant fine as a door closing. My body did exactly what I asked of it, which was to get up, to go, and to hold. And it wasn't ignoring me, it was obeying me. Everyone would tell you the rule was to be strong. The one we all name because it's easy, but mine was older and it never mentioned strength. It kind of went like this. If I stop, I'm no longer the one who takes care of people. I'm the one who gets taken care of. And that was scary for me. And I didn't know how to even be that anyway. Having never been that person to be taken care of, not once. So my body kept me on the right side of that line the only way it knew, which was to keep me upright and going. And what my shoulders held was never the illness, but the belief about who I'd become if I set that pattern down. And that rule was older than my cancer, because when I was a child, my home life was often unsafe. I can recall lying in bed at night while my whole body braced, my fists tightened, and my legs went stiff as a board, and I would shake. And I want you to hear this next part as plainly as I say it, because while all that was going on inside of me, nothing was happening. No one was in the room. No one had come through the door, no sound to account for. So my body wasn't reacting to an event. It was bracing against an expectation, because a body doesn't clench against what's happening, but against what it has learned to expect. And here's the second thing, which I've turned over far more than the first. I knew not to let anyone see it. Nobody told me that, and somehow I worked it out on my own in the dark and as a child. And that is where shame gets installed. Not later in some conversation, but right there in a child's decision that what her body does isn't fit to be seen. It's why so many women carry something in their bodies they have never once described out loud. And some of you are hearing your own body described for the first time. Now, it still happens on rare occasions when I'm very stressed. My arms and my fists still do this. And it didn't stop, but what changed is that I'm no longer ashamed. So when I recognize my body is feeling stress, I breathe, or I step away, or bring it relief in some other manner. And that is discernment, which is the whole skill, working in a body rather than in a notebook. Which means you don't have to be finished or have made it stop, because you can be free of shame of something that still happens and answer your body instead of hiding it. So, how do you find a belief like that when it's been running underneath your life without announcing itself? You follow the why beneath it, which is the work at the center of the Patterns to Purpose method. And it is slower and gentler than it sounds. And it's not something a woman does by herself in an evening. Let's walk through one a little ways and let's use something ordinary. Let's say you don't sit down at night until the kitchen is finished, until it's all clean. And if I asked you why, you might say something like that sitting down while it's undone feels like getting away with something. One question in, and we've already left the kitchen. Then I would ask, so why would resting feel like you're getting away with something? And you might respond, because rest isn't something you take, it's something you're given once the work is done. And then I may respond with, well, why does it have to be given? And you might say, because the people you've watched growing up who rested were the first ones everybody else carried, and you were never going to be carried. And if you kept going gently with somebody beside you, what you would eventually arrive at is a sentence that sounds something like this: I'm not allowed to stop only when there's nothing left to do, because that proves I'm still needed. That is the root truth. And notice that you've ended up somewhere that has nothing to do with dishes, because that sentence isn't describing your evening at all. It's describing you. And nothing in it is an accusation. It's just the first accurate thing anyone said about why you're standing at the counter. It's because you were never broken. You were patterned. And those shoulders of yours at the counter at 9:40 at night were never holding a dish. They were holding the line between the one who takes care and the one who gets carried. So asking you to relax those shoulders is like asking you to cross that line. And of course, they come straight back up. But a sentence like that is something you can finally take out and look at in daylight and hold it up against the kitchen that you're actually standing in tonight. It simply isn't true anymore. The pattern doesn't disappear when you name it, but it does lose its authority over you. Let me tell you what happens afterwards, beginning with the breath. because that changes first. And changes in a way you can feel because a breath taken on duty stays shallow and high in the chest and never reaches the belly where the deepest exhales live. I'm not going to tell you to breathe deeply because you've tried that, and probably sitting in your car outside somewhere with the engine off. And what you found is that you could make a breath bigger, but you could not make it easy. When the holding is no longer required, the breath changes without being asked, slower and longer on the way out. And something in a long exhale tells the body the thing it was ready for isn't coming. Then other things begin to arrive, so small you could miss them. And your jaw lets go, and there's a small shock in that. Because until it did, you had no idea it was being held. And that's how most of this arrives, not as relief, but as information you didn't have a minute ago. Your back touches the back of a chair, all of it. And you realize you've been sitting forward for 30 years. And you feel your feet, not thinking about them, but feeling them inside your own shoes on the floor, holding you up. Your hands get warm, you're hungry at an ordinary hour, and you put your head down and sleep comes without the list running underneath. And then one evening you notice that you're not braced for the sound of a car in a driveway. And you've been braced for that sound since you were a girl. And you never knew because you cannot hear a thing you have heard your whole life. You can only hear it when it stops. Self-care and love gets in too, because a bracing body is too busy protecting itself to let anything in. And once it doesn't have to brace, you begin to notice. You notice the sun on your arm is warm, and someone who loves you is able to reach inside of you. Now, the honest part, which I want you to have beforehand, because safety often doesn't feel good at first. And a body on duty for 40 years doesn't come off into peace, but into exhaustion. So you sit down on a Saturday and you can't get up, and it's frightening. Or the shaking arrives and in your hands or your legs or your jaw with no emergency in the room, and you might cry with no story attached because nothing's happened. Or you're at the sink and it comes and your mind's looking for a reason and can't find one, and none of that is backsliding, and none of that is the work failing. It's just the bill. You held on to these things for decades while working and raising children and sitting in waiting rooms, and you couldn't afford to pay it then, so you're paying it now. And this is exactly where women quit, because they feel wrong and decide that feeling wrong means it isn't working when it is working. And this is what working feels like. Let me take one more thing off your shoulders, because the goal was never to have a body that never clenches And an aligned body was never just a body at ease. It's a body telling the truth. So an aligned body braces when there's something to brace against, and it rests when there isn't. It's matching your present, not your past. That's accuracy, not softness. My arms still do what they do, and it isn't misalignment. It's my body telling the truth about my day. And I answer it instead of arguing with it. The physical body doesn't stay in its own lane, which surprises women who have worked on their thinking for years. A held body keeps signaling the mind that something's wrong, and the mind is a meaning maker that can't leave a signal unexplained. So it manufactures a worry to explain the bracing, which means that 2 a.m. loop and that tightness in your chest are one event in 2 rooms. A held body also can't let feelings move. And feeling is motion, because a locked jaw and a held breath are how you stop yourself from crying. And they work. So when the holding loosens, the feelings arrive. And sometimes all at once, which is why release and tears turn up together. The spiritual body speaks in a quiet register. So a body in an alarmed state drowns it out, which means stillness isn't a spiritual luxury, but the volume knob. And the 4 bodies are one system in which the physical one tells the truth first and it changes last. Which brings me to what I most want to leave you with. Our bodies are our home. You can't live in a place that you're guarding. And if you've ever spent the night at a window watching the road for something that never came, then you know you weren't at home in that house as much as you were stationed in it. Once you can say the truth out loud, you begin to drop into the house instead, living in it rather than managing it. And your body has never been your enemy, but your most faithful companion, carrying everything you carried and waiting for you to no longer need it. One thing to carry this week, and it isn't a task, so find one place in your body that holds one rather than all of them. Maybe it's the jaw or the shoulders or the way you never quite sit all the way down in a chair. And instead of telling it to stop, sit with the awareness that it's holding something for you. And don't go hunting tonight for what that is, because this isn't an evening's work and it was never meant to be done in a hurry. So just sit with it. And if something honest gets named and your body goes right on holding, you haven't failed, because that holding has been in place for 40 years and your body isn't going to take your word for it in one evening. A body stands down in its own time and in pieces. It might be a little on the exhale, a little in your sleep, a little on an ordinary day when you're sitting down before the dishes are done and nothing falls apart. May your body receive a little more rest today than yesterday. May your breath go a little deeper on the exhale than this morning. May the places that have been holding you begin gently to let go, not because you command them, but because you found out what they held. May you sit down one evening with the work unfinished, and may nothing fall apart. And if what arrives first is the tiredness, may you let it come and not call it failure. May you be at home here. Rest well tonight, and I'll see you in the next episode.